Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about layout for a magazine spread. Ultimately, when we open a magazine, all the readers will see the left and right pages as one unit, even though technically they are two separate um, pages, but we perceive everything as one layout or one entity. Um, and this is commonly known as a page spread. There are different types of opening spreads. We're going to particularly talk about the opening spread. The opening spread has a lot of functionalities for a magazine. Um, but the types of spreads that we're going to look at are a split, three-quarter image, image with text overlay, and then stylized. These are common terms used within a graphic design office or field. We're going to start off with a split. And the function of a spread is when people go through a magazine, it takes up, it has a little bit more time and energy spent on design and layout that will capture the reader's attention. The spread is usually a very dynamic and very creative process outside of the article text. It's the idea of being able to go through a magazine, flip through it, and then stop at an image or stop at text, and be able to say, "Hey, I'm interested in reading that." In this case, a spread. I'm going to use the cursor here to kind of show where the middle part is. So this is the middle. This is what's called the gutter. This is where the two pages are joined at a binding process, and so we have a split between the left and right page. It's signified by the color. It's signified by the physicality of the page. And page spreads or opening spreads can use illustrations. They can use photography. They can use different types of new fonts. It's a place where, again, a lot of designers will spend a little bit more energy in creating something that has an attraction or ability to stop somebody to take a look at it. Here's another idea of a split. We have an image on the right. Image can be on the left. Image can be on the right. Then we also have the title of this article, which has a lot of great emphasis here for the title here, and then the little, probably a little subheader, and then we also have bylines, and then we also have like the folio pages at the bottom left or right of a page, which indicates the page number. Oftentimes, there's exemptions to the case where designers may leave off the page number, or may leave off the folio information at the bottom, or the magazine name, just to give more attention to the layout and not to interrupt it with all this other information which is on every other page. We have what's called a three-quarter image. This is now the image is now crossing over the border or the gutter here, and then creeps into the other side of the page. Again, we can, a lot of times for designers is being able to use this space and have negative space to reinforce the emphasis. Negative space is a great tool to use, and for this purpose, because there's nothing else surrounding or impacting the lettering or the messaging that's going on. So you have the title, you have the subheader, and then you have the bylines. And bylines are generally always small, because this is oftentimes how illustrators and photographers and writers ensure that they get credit for their work. It's documented that their work is part of this magazine or part of this article, and it's important to have those bylines for both the magazine and for the contributor. Mostly contributors are freelancers, so in order to have that proof or evidence of their existence and their work, that's where we put the byline. Another three-quarter image, this is with the photograph, and then this one here has what we call text overlay. So it's a combination of a couple of things, but primarily this is a three-quarter image layout. And again, here's the middle part here. The one thing that we try to do within within graphic design is to avoid the gutter. This would not work or interrupt the image or the messaging of the image if the person's face or head was like placed right around in here. Um, so we want to make sure that there's this, we know there's going to be a gutter, but we want to make sure where the cut of the page will be conducive of supporting the message, but still, be able to cut it. This is what's an image with text overlay. So this is a full 2-page spread of an image. This is what's also known as a full bleed. So the image is bleeding off the page. Imagine if it's bleeding off the page, then we can just cut it and trim it to be nice and perfect. And this is the text being overlaid on top of the image, and this is where using the negative space within an image is very advantageous for a graphic designer because you can occupy that space with text, and then you have this idea of the negative space. There's nothing else surrounding it or very limited things next to the text, so it ideally gives the text more emphasis because there's nothing else to look at, there's no distractions, and there's nothing to impede the message or the text. And again, here you go, you have the title of the article, which we can call header. Header or title kind of works the same way in both in layout. But ultimately, we just call it the title. And then there's the subheader, and then there's the byline credits for the contributors. This is using a photograph, actually a photographic illustration, because it's not only this photograph here, but this photograph here, which has been, cut out and put on top of each other to create this illustration. And a lot of times the illustration, either with the illustration or a photographic illustration, either one, illustrates the idea or the essence of the title. So we have mass versus class, and then we think about this as the class, social structure. High class or a high, affluent people will have luxury items, and then the masses will shop at Target. So there's this kind of understanding of like how the definition or how you define the text and the article with an image. In the previous example here, we're talking about a new dynamic in the housing market. Houses, if you do a lot of study on the real estate market, housing market, houses are becoming smaller and not large and oversized. What it used to be is now becoming a very everybody's living in smaller spaces, even though they might have their own separate house, so they're still living in something small. This is what you can see evident in the city of Seattle. When you go down there, if you go down through some of the more popular neighborhoods, such as Capitol Hill or Fremont or Ballard, you're starting to see like old houses being torn down, and then multiple houses built on the same property, being able to accommodate 2-3 times more families and people within one little space. So being able to illustrate those ideas is part of a graphic designer's responsibility for interpreting representing the article. And then we have what's called a stylized, and we can kind of come in here with a 3/4 stylized because the image again is across both sides of the page. Stylized can also come in an illustration form where you've taken a certain image, such as the state of Florida, and then putting some horse's ears and eyes and a mouth in order to kind of illustrate the idea of the horse parks or the racing parks. Again, then you can play on the words where it's like the main event, main MANE, talks about the hair of the horse, as opposed to the main event, which is the primary event. So it's kind of having this play on words. Again, titles can be in lowercase if you want, but then when you enlarge it to more of a display size or setting, it becomes very large and emphasized. And then you see the subheader and maybe a little bit of the article. This is a lot of times designers will put a little bit of the article as a teaser As a you have the introductory paragraph, which kind of sets the tone of the article. You can put that at the beginning and kind of give it that the reader a little bit of a tease or a little idea of what's going to happen in the following pages. And then of course you have byline credits, and then at the bottom left you have the stuff that's usually on the master page, page numbers, title of the magazine, and such. And Stylized, comes with an image as well. Um, here's the middle of the page break right here. You have the photograph. You have the leaning of the text at an angle. You have heavy use of stylizing the text from white to image. This gray part is actually part of the extra part of the image here because the image is a little bit on the wider side. Then you have the illustration part of um, having the everything at an angle. And then this one has a little bit more of the article here. And this is a space-saving process for designers and magazines to now start putting a lot of the article within the opening spread because it just saves one extra page. And then you do this a couple times in a magazine, you can save like 10, 15 pages, and that costs money when you have more pages and more process. Um, and then we're going to talk about the article spread. Now that we've looked at the article opening spread, we're going to look at the spread for the text, that text-heavy base. This is a very stylized article from the opening spread to the article spread, and I put the article spread or the article opening spread so you can kind of see what it looks like functionally in comparison to the article spread. You can see here's a image split. Not much negative space, but very large amounts of emphasis, and then you have your subheader here, which is also emphasized as well. Just a little, in hierarchy, a little bit less than the actual title. And then you have the image with some stylized illustration on top of the image, and there's a myriad of ways to kind of have the combination. But when you get to the article, it becomes very purposeful and very functional because it's really text-heavy. Articles, something we want to read, and then this is where we switch our modality a little bit. And then we use the modality of organizing text in a nice, neat, orderly fashion. This is a bit stylized in kind of relationship to the opening spread, but it in many ways becomes almost impacts the reader's ability to read the article. Yes, we can. There's contrast between the dark text and the light blue, and there's a little bit of contrast between the black text and the red of the lightning bolt. But then you have all this stuff layered on top of it, and all this layering process can impact somebody's ability to read the article in a negative way, where people may take a little bit longer to read the article because they have to struggle to kind of separate the text from the background. So some things to think about is that sometimes it's great to stylize things, which is great for the opening spread, but for the article spread, you want to minimize the amount of stylizations going on because, again, the article is something that's supposed to be read, not just looked at as a piece of art or so. And then you can also do things like the text wrap around if need be, which is a part of a stylized process, where the text wraps around an image. But those are, again, more advanced functions. But I wanted to give you the idea of things that could ideas of what negatively impact a reader. A less stylized article here. Here's the opening spread here. It's all about this person named Holly. You can see the O is kind of falling off, and it kind of gives the illustration, but you might not know what the illustration totally means yet until you actually read it. But I would think about maybe something's falling apart here. But then you have the article spread here. You have the kind of that stylized play on the opening spread with the W here, the cap of the capitalization of the first word, And then you have the structure of everything kind of laid out in grids. Apparently, it gives you a little bit of a timeline that's going on here. Because you can see it's 1998, 1999, 2002, 2007, and then it breaks down into the months. So, and then this is what's called the pull quote. These are often put in layouts with text-heavy layouts as a way of when people flip through the magazine, they would have an ability to stop, or it attracts people to stop and read this little quote. Pull quotes can be anywhere between, generally anywhere between 7 to 12 words, in order to be able to enlarge it and to be able to like, hey, this is an important part of the article. Um, Read this, and then that may be served as a leader or a way of baiting people into, hey, I like this quote, or this is an interesting quote. Let's see what the article's about. Let's go to flip back up to the opening spread. And again, another one here. This is a split article spread. Because it's split between the image and the text. You have image. This is the opening spread here. There's a great amount of negative space to kind of leave for contemplation, and not to just not to. It's less dense, so it's not as heavy or visually heavy looking as opposed to this, which is completely text and image, top to bottom, left to right, all four sides, and covering both pages. Where the opening spread oftentimes give you a little bit of negative space to kind of give a breathing room so you can concentrate on the key parts, which is the title, the image, and then again, this is like a little bit of a leader here. If you think about this in some ways, a magazine spread takes a couple of things to think about as far as layout. Over design is something you want to avoid because it impacts the readability of the article, but maybe over design is appropriate for the opening spread, but not for the article. Avoiding the gutter, as you can see, like with the article case back here, is like you want to avoid the gutter because the thicker the magazine, the thicker the spine, the thicker the gutter, and it starts to curl and harder to read. Misaligned elements such as text columns and text boxes should be aligned. They shouldn't be out of place, and it's a very organized kind of structure. Things that will always help a layout is going to be sketches and using your columns when you're inside of InDesign. Also your leading and kerning tools because it helps use up space and take up a little bit of space. Also, especially if kerning is important for the opening spread because typography is a very strong way of communicating, but then if it doesn't look even in spacing, then it just seems a little messy. And also using your alignment tools, which helps eliminate the ability or the anything being misaligned in the future. But I also want to switch real quick to sketching for layouts. This is oftentimes what designers will kind of do is, if you have a multi-page document, is kind of sketch what the layout will look like to give you that flow. You could do this in InDesign or in a layout process, but you don't. The ability to sketch allows you to kind of sketch a lot of different things at one time. So in this case, this would be 9 page spreads or a total of 18 pages of a document. So you kind of get a visual flow of how one page leads to the next. So we always start at the upper left corner and kind of go from one spread to the next spread to the next spread and to the next spread. And you can see there's a little bit of diversity from going from this page and flipping the page to this one here, where it goes from image heavy to text heavy, and then it kind of goes from text heavy to now image heavy. So you can also kind of visually see how everything's going to be put together on a sketch, as opposed to doing the InDesign. You don't see it as fluidly between like one to the next, and then when you see it as a sketch, you can kind of stand back and see like how the entire spreads or entire magazine or publication flows. You can do this when you print out your InDesign documents. A lot of times the designers will print the page spreads as a page spread, and then be able to kind of put up on a dry erase board and post them up, and then be able to see everything as a whole. It's a little bit harder because you just need more space in a big whiteboard to do so. But any way you can to kind of get an idea what the entire spread looks like is advantageous for you. Um, some folks can go very exacting in their sketch process and kind of draw it out with a pencil and ruler. In this case, we have 16 spreads, so we have about 32 pages here. And you can kind of again see the flow. Here's the opening spread here. It would likely be an opening spread because it's a very image heavy, very little text. There's boxes with X's will represent images. Boxes with the word text in it or subtitle or what you want to put in it. It could be like table of contents. It could be header. It could be big title goes here. That box with the big lettering, will give a clear indication to a designer or somebody else who's on the team what's going to go there, and then lines for the body copy. And the lines can be squiggly, or just be a straight little line. This one here is very structured and very organized. You can see it's very clean and kind of see the layout go from one to the next. And layout has thousands of varieties of how to use the image and how to use the text and how to use the body copy. And those these are all kind of spaced out in columns. So it's being able to have an idea of how columns work and how to organize in columns help you organize layouts. Columns. Here we are at columns. Within InDesign, you can customize these columns here. So if the wide part here is the column where text would go, but also we can use, this is the gutter, but also what we can do is in column layouts is actually group columns together to form one bigger column. So for instance, I can take these 3 columns and from here, this edge here to this edge here, put a text box between 3 columns and then put text throughout the columns, and then I can subsequently do the next column here. This is a 9-grid or 9-column layout. I can group 3 columns, each of the 3 columns, and then say a 3-column text layout. So there'll be 3 text columns coming down. So in this case, I can show you over here. They grouped, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns here. And then use it as 1 column for the text. So this is a 7-column wide text box. And design on the columns help align everything to be nice and neat. In many cases, and a lot of times we use the align tool just to make sure it's on the line explicitly. So you can see here, you don't have to use the entire column width. Sometimes they'll use it here maybe for the introduction or the description. And then down here, they can, it can be short. It can allow me to be short just because it fits within the box for the other information that's on here. Same thing here for the table of contents here. You can see here that the 3 columns here have been dedicated to images. There's generally you want to stay on the column lines. There are exceptions to the case where this image here is not on the column, but it actually is on the column and maybe a column and a half. And then so you have to mathematically divide the 2 boxes to make sure that they're equal, so that way it stays nice and neatly organized. And then there's this image over here, which is a 3-column wide image, and this is taking up the most of the space within that 3 columns. So putting everything on the boxes or in the columns is always imperative within a layout for a magazine. But I want to switch over to web design, or what we now call UI or user interface. User interface design has a lot of the same functionalities as a magazine spread, especially when using columns and organizing space. And if you kind of think back to one of the previous articles that we saw, or the examples of the opening spread or the article spread, if you were just to take one page of that one page is approximately a little bit larger than a tablet, and that organization is still, using columns is still imperative. The only thing you don't get in a tablet is you don't get to see a full spread, and you don't get to see it spread out on 2 pages. You don't get to see the breadth or the heaviness or the largeness of that. So you're just limited on a UI um, layout for just the screen itself. And then you can see here that these columns here. This is 2, 4, 6, 8 columns. Um, 8 columns or 8 or 9 columns, either way. You're still using it to organize. 8 columns is efficient because of the fact that you'll always have an even set of columns on both left and right side. Um, so in this case here, they use 4 columns here for the main copy text, and then they use 2 columns to the right for other information, maybe advertisement, and then they use 2 columns over here for organizing all this, the perhaps the menus over here, but they keep it negative space over here so that way readers can concentrate onto this. Narrow columns of text is easier to read than one long line of text, or which, if you think about your Google Docs or Microsoft Word, that's just only 1 column, and that's a long line of text. And there's studies that show that it's easier and more efficient for people to read when it's just narrower columns. And the interesting thing part about layouts for tablets or for UI is that you get to rotate. So now designer has to think about not only what the designer looks like or a page looks like on a vertical scale. We have a rotation process, so now we have to think about what it looks like on a horizontal scale. So designers have actually twice the work, and you might think that the computer does it. Computer has part of what to do with it. The designer actually designs it, and then the computer has to be able to interpret the designer's intentions. So here's a vertical, here's a horizontal, same information. You have to use space a little differently. How it looks like. You can almost interpret this as maybe a spread, but really it's not, because you put that middle part right there. It's only going to be 1 page. You get an emulation of it, but it's not the actual functionality of the spread. And you can see that the article changes its intent. One of the key things to kind of think about as far as images is that the space allocation has to be fairly close to each other. If you can think about this, if we did this mathematically, this will take up less than 1/3, probably about just a little over, maybe a little over 1/3. If I were to say this is the middle, the image will probably take about maybe 40%. If it was cut down the middle here, it would be 50%, but this is about 40, maybe 35%. If I were to measure this one, this is approximately 35%. Maybe just a little less than 35%. And so the weight of the image has to stay the same between a horizontal and a vertical layout. And then the text, it's almost the same amount of text. You can see where the next question is being asked. It takes up the same amount of spacing on both sides when you flip it. And that has to go through for every single layout that you're flipping through. And it works again, with like an article itself. You can, this is definitely the columnization is going to go on here. The thing about with certain layouts is that you only look at that one page on the UI, but then you have the continuous scroll that goes on. That this would be a long scroll down for the rest of the article, and same thing here. This would be a long scroll down. You only see one page at a time, but when designers have to look at it, they have to kind of look at it as a large scroll and be able to lay it out in that function. Here we are scrolling through the article. If you have any questions, let me know, and thank you.